Hey, what's up guys? Hardleg Joe here with the One Deck profile for the Pure Kaiju deck. I'm just going to go through everything in here and then I'll explain how it works. So we've got 3 of the Star-Destroying Kaiju, 2 Thunder King, 2 Dogaran, 3 the Mystery Dust Kaiju aka Mothra, 3 Gameciel, 3 Radian, and 2 Kamungus. For our spells, we've got 1 Upstart Goblin, 3 Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, 3 Twin Twister, 3 the Kaiju Files, and 3 Kaiju Waterfront. For our traps, we've got 1 Jar of Greed, 1 Jar of Avarice, 3 Kaiju Capture Mission, and 3 Call the Haunted. The extra deck is not important in the slightest. I've never been able to make anything in here. Pretty much unless your opponent gives you a monster, you can't make anything in here. But it's never bad to have an extra deck, just in case. So Kaijus, at least the Pure Kaijus, are kind of a stun deck. They work by interrupting your opponent, wasting their resources and stuff like that. If you're unfamiliar with them, all the Kaijus have the same summoning condition, which is you can special summon this card from your hand to your opponent's side of the field by attributing 1 monster they control. If your opponent controls a Kaiju, you can special summon this card from your hand in attack position. So you've got all these huge monsters, you give your opponent 1 by tributing over 1 of their monsters, and then you can summon 1 of your own. In addition, they all have effects that have to do with Kaiju Counters. We have 3 different cards that gain Kaiju Counters, the main one being this Kaiju Waterfront. Every time a card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you put a Kaiju counter on this, maximum 5. Once per turn, if there are 3 or more, you can search a Kaiju from your deck, and if this card would be destroyed, you can remove a Kaiju counter instead. So this has a lot of protection. It lets you search if you get 3 counters. You don't have to remove the counters to search, you just have to have 3 on there. And it just builds up counters. That's why we play stuff like Upstart Goblin, Jar of Greed, and this Jar of Avarice. Avarice lets you recycle a little bit, but these are mostly just like draw power, and also they'll send a card from the field to the graveyard so you can add more counters to Kaiju Waterfront. We've also got the Kaiju Files, probably the second most important one. This is each time a Kaiju is special summoned from the hand or graveyard, you can put a counter on it, and it gets up to 5. Once per turn, you can target a Kaiju on either side of the field, destroy it, and special summon a Kaiju with a different name from the deck to that controller's field. So this is really good in the sense that, like, if you get 2 of your Kaijus that have, like, equal attack, or that you don't want your opponent, if you get 2 of them that you don't want your opponent to have, you can special summon 1 to their field, and then just trade it out for anyone from your deck with the Kaiju Files. Or if you have 1 on your side of the field, maybe you want a big one that wants to attack, you attack with it, and then you use the Kaiju Files to trade it out for 1 that has like an effect that you want to use, a more defensive one. It also has the effect that if there's 3 counters on it, you could send it to the graveyard to add 1 of your Kaiju spell traps. I rarely use that because you need that, but if you get 2 of these on the field and you have a whole bunch of Kaiju counters, it could be good to clear the field a little bit, maybe get 1 of your Kaiju Slumbers, or maybe your Kaiju Capture Mission. This is the only Kaiju Trap. This is if it has less than 3 counters on it, you can target a Kaiju on the field, change it to face down defense position, and then put a Kaiju counter on this. The max it can have is 3. So this is also good as far as like, give your opponent a big Kaiju, then you summon 1, and then you can set your opponent's Kaiju. So then you can attack over if it has less defense. Things like Dogaran are really good for this, or the Mystery Dust Kaiju, the Moth. Those are all really good because they have lower defense than they have attack, and you can get over them with some of your bigger monsters. This also has the effect that if your opponent destroys it, you can draw 2 cards, which is really good, but doesn't come up very often unless you just set it on the first turn. So you use all 3 of these to gather as many counters as you can, and then all the Kaijus can use the counters to activate their effects. Probably the most useful one would be this Star-Destroying Kaiju. It's if a card or effect is activated that targets 1 card and no other cards, you can remove 3 counters from anywhere on the field, negate that effect, and if you do, destroy 1 card on the field. So this is not just cards that target this monster, it's cards that target anything. If they activate a Norden and they try to target a card in the graveyard, you can negate it and then blow up a card on their side of the field. And this is not once per turn, so if you could build up multiple counters, you can just keep using this, which on a 3,300 attack point monster is already pretty awesome. Gameciel's probably the best defense monster. You can tag it out with the Kaiju Files. It's remove 2 counters to negate a spell, trap, or monster effect and banish it, which is amazing, because that means even things like Kirin, the Magispectre Unicorn. They try to use that while you have Gameciel out. You can just banish it and negate the effect. You just want to make sure, be careful with Gameciel. He has the lowest amount of attack, so it's really tempting to give him to your opponent if you want to attack over it. But once you start getting counters, you really don't want to give them Gameciel, because then he's going to be able to negate anything that you can do pretty much by taking the counters from either side of the field. Probably the next most useful is Radian. This is one of my personal favorites. You can remove 2 counters to summon a Radian token. It has 2,800 attack and 0 defense. This is really important because you can only control 1 Kaiju at a time, so you can't really have much field presence except through Radian. Radian's going to allow you to keep summoning tokens, and once you get like 2 or 3 2800 tokens, you can then just tag him out for one of your more defensive ones like Gameciel or the Star Destroyer. The other ones are of limited use. We've got Thunder King. He can remove 3 counters to make 3 attacks on monsters, and your opponent can't activate cards or effects. Good if they swarm, but doesn't really happen all that much with this deck. Dorgaran can remove 3 Kaiju counters to blow up all monsters on the field, but it can't attack the turn you activate this. This is actually the card you usually want to give to your opponent because you can attack over it with your bigger monsters, and it can't use its effect during either player's turn. You just want to make sure that you absolutely get rid of that before their turn starts, especially if you have counters on the field, otherwise they'll wipe your field. Of course, it can't attack the turn it does that, but still. Next up is the Mystery Dust Kaiju. This is another one you definitely don't want to give to your opponent. This is remove 3 counters. The attack and defense of all other monsters on the field becomes halved. This is amazing, because this means you can give them any one of these higher attack ones, and you're able to have their attack, so you can just get over them. Likewise, if you give them something smaller, if they already have monsters on the field, you could just like lower their attack. And that's how you do a lot of your damage if you can't like swarm with the tokens, as with this guy. What's really neat is if you can have all the attack and then trade out for the Thunder King, and then he can attack 3 times on monsters that have their attack halved. Like I said though, because that's during either player's turn, as long as you have Kaiju counters, you really don't want to give your opponent this. Finally, we have Kamungus, who is the least useful in my opinion. He has the second lowest attack, which is kind of neat. And he has the effect that when your opponent normal or special summons a monster, you can remove 2 Kaiju counters, and then that monster can't attack, and its effects are negated. Which, again, you don't want to give your opponent this if you have any kind of counters, because 2 counters is pretty easy to get. You summon this on their side of the field, and then you try to summon your Kaiju, and your Kaiju's not going to be able to attack or activate its effects, which sucks. The only other cards I didn't mention in here, we got Twin Twister and Call of the Haunted. This is just spell trap removal. You got to have at least some. Call of the Haunted's good because all these can be special summoned from the graveyard. If your opponent doesn't have a monster for you to tribute, or you only have 1 Kaiju, this is a good way to discard it to the graveyard and then summon it back out. Finally, Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. This is destroy as many monsters on the field as possible, then summon 2 attack position Kaijus with different names on either side of the field. They can't change their battle positions, and they must attack if able, which is really good. It basically just clears your opponent's field unless you establish something immediately. This also has the effect that if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to search for a Kaiju, which again makes it have some synergy with Twin Twister. You can get rid of it and then have your search. As I said already, the extra deck's not all that important. You can just put whatever you want in it. As for the side deck, the couple side deck cards I would consider, Forbidden Chalice is really good, because you can give them one of your monsters that have like good effects, and then just negate it. And even with 400 extra attack, Gameciel is not going to be able to stand up against most of your higher things. So that's a little bit of thing. And plus, just effect negation in general can be pretty good. There's also, if you really need to speed things up, if you're going against a faster deck, you can use Trade-In because you're running a lot of level 8s. I'd main deck this originally, but it ended up not working so well, because I only have the 3 Call the Haunted, and oftentimes I would just end up with more Kaijus in the graveyard that I need. You can actually go through them really quick once you get going with the Kaiju Files and Kaiju Waterfront, both pretty much searching out whatever Kaiju you want, which is why we play the 1 Jar of Avarice to sort of shuffle, to reset the deck if need be. I'd also consider playing Raigeki and some Dark Holes. Raigeki in general is just really good because you can give them a Kaiju and then blow up their field. Dark Hole not as much because it clears your field too, but again, if you have those Call the Haunted, you're not going to be in that much of a trouble. It can also be good if they have like a Beals and like 5 other monsters. You clear the field of everything except for that one, and then you just tribute over it. Skill Drain's really good in this deck. I don't like to rely on one-ofs, but once you get rid of all their effects, then you just have a whole bunch of 3,000 plus beat sticks, and it really hampers your opponent more than anything. Likewise, Neospatian Grand Mole. This can be really good if it battles a monster. You can return both monsters to the hand, so you can just get your Kaijus back. And of course, you're special summoning a lot, so you can normal summon this, attack it into their Kaiju, send it back to the hand, and then attack with the other Kaiju directly. Of course, there's some decks where Kamungus can be really good, so I'd probably put a 3rd one in here just in case. And then there's this super anti-Kaiju War Machine Mech Dogaran. This one's a little bit different than the other ones. Can't be normal summoned or set. If your opponent controls a Kaiju, you can special summon it, so you can't tribute this to your opponent's side of the field. But you can remove 2 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field to equip 1 Kaiju from your hand or graveyard, and this gains attack equal to the combined attacks of all the things equipped to it. So this has the potential to get up to like 6,000, 8,000 plus attack over several turns, but because it needs those Kaiju counters, you can run into problems where you don't have the ability, like all you can do is summon this thing and then it has 0 attack. There is one combo that seems really neat about it, because it doesn't say that it can't be special summoned. And you would think that Interrupted Kaiju Slumber would let you summon this to your opponent's side of the field with 0 attack, and that would be awesome. But for some reason, that doesn't work. I'm not sure if that's a glitch with YGOPro, or if there's some sort of ruling on it. If they changed it, I would definitely run one of these, just so that you can Kaiju Slumber and put this on your opponent's side of the field, because being able to attack over it with the 3300 would just be a massive advantage. So there you go, there's the Pure Kaiju deck. Not the best Kaiju deck, probably not even in the top 3, but it's interesting. It's cool to see how they're supposed to work when you just run nothing but the Kaijus. Next week, I'll be doing something a little bit more competitive. I have a Patreon request to look at Cyber Angels, so we're going to be ritual summoning. Should be interesting. Until then, good luck. Have fun.